Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sapna Rise. I'm Natasha Doshi, and we have two really enigmatic personalities with us today. We have we have author Anshul Chaturvedi, and we have director Rajkumar Gupta. And we're here in conversation to talk about the book. I hope you can see it. Yeah, the Vivekananda Handbook for Everyday Living. And over to Rajkumar ji and Anshul.
Yeah, hi, Anshul, hi,
Hi.
Natasha. Yeah. So, I think I was really, I mean, when I read this book, I just picked it up, and when I read it, I think I was not aware about the principles, or I mean, I had heard about Swami Vivekananda. We all have heard, and but never gone into the principle or teaching or the philosophy of Vivekananda. But I was really astonished with the relevance of these principles. Once I read the book and realized how relevant it was in today's time. It's not just a book which talks about a certain things or certain principles at certain time, but it is so relevant now in our everyday life. In say personal or professional, life. I was very engaged with the teaching. I was very engaged, with his principle. What also made me realize that, when I was reading the book, that, what we think is important in life really may not be that important, and what we see as as a big problem that can't be solved may be as big or small, problem as we make it out to be. The book also really enlightened me, to ask myself, or ask yourself rather, to look at yourself, not look at yourself through the world or through other people's eyes, which most of the time we end up doing, and that's that's what creates a lot of problems. So I just wanted to start. I wanted to understand your thought process, and I wanted to start with one quote in your book, which is a very deep quote, and that, in this book, while I was reading it, really struck me. That from age 17 onwards, he has helped me navigate life. So of course you are referring to the teachings and principles of Swami Vivekananda. So it's a very long period, from 17 onwards, and a deep thought. I just wanted you to expand on it, to let us know, to talk about it, and make us understand how is it relevant today. So many of us want to know its relevance in that sense.
So Raj, one thing that I mentioned specifically is because in teenage you experiment with things, right? Ideologically also, not just with socializing and other stuff, but you always hear. Let us say if you talk about a student life, or even about when people get into civil services or elsewhere, sometimes you ask the question कि भाई देश सेवा कर रहे हो कि अपनी सेवा कर रहे हो? Notionally speaking, तो आता यार वो idealism जो था ना शुरू का. There was this philosophy in my earlier years, but after a few years in the system takes you over. In most things. I mean, I don't know how to do it for cinema, for example. You come saying that art is the core point, right? Or you want to come in to communicate things and be a messenger of a thought, but it comes down to box office, how much do you earn in the first weekend and how you finance the next movie.
Yeah.
So there were questions even at that stage. Because it's not very regular, or as I made the point, it's not very cool to be seen talking about quote unquote religion, though it's cool to be talking about philosophy.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, if you take abstract philosophy and you quote some ism, or you quote some grand author who's written some abstract book, that seems to be cool and ideological. But you take somebody who's religious, it gets a little passive. Array, this guy is religious. I mean, that's not supposed to be the coolest thing in college. So I've taken pains to explain that you're mixing up two different things. I mean, you can be atheist and have philosophy. So this is about philosophy as such, because religion will be defined too often as behavioral models. Religion we define as what you wear, or what you eat, when you fast. This is not about that.
Yeah.
And so the reason I've gone back to explain the narrative is to make the point that it was not it's not a fad that, teenage you experiment with it, and what at 17 looks okay, at 27 you say, yeah, this is okay for that stage. And by the time you're 37 and 47, which is like, historic and ancient and so old now, it looks like अरे वो तब की बातें थी. So in this case, because I have not been able to outgrow, and I think not outgrowing in some ways means that I think the same way I thought 30 years back, which is, I don't know, good thing or a bad thing. You could call it immaturity also, that you haven't changed enough. But the point I made recurrently was that, because even when I was there, I was told, okay, this is a fad. At one stage, I remember, my parents were worried that I spent too much time thinking and reading and sitting in the room, with the agarbatti or something like that, abstract, and said, I hope he won't run away and become a monk or something. They actually asked people that. Kundali mein dekho, matlab normal kaam karega ki kahin gayab ho jayega. But the thought always is, okay, it's a phase, it's a fad. He could get influenced for a couple of years, and so on and so forth. And when you work in the real world, quote unquote, you always have this guidance from people telling you, you can't be so. You can't bring this into everyday life, right? You can't. This is not day-to-day living. Now, day-to-day living, we make it sound like something very, very critical, very important, that only we are discovering it.
Okay.
That you have to be pragmatic and practical and adjusting and accommodating and etc. etc.
Yeah.
So any ideology seems, that's ideological, that's otherworldly, and when it's religion and you talk about, say, things like death or etc., that always ki baad mein baat karenge. Abhi, go and do your everyday living, make your career, and we'll talk about this when you're retired. So it's at two stages, if you know what I mean, that before you start actually work in life, you have supposed to have the luxury of being philosophical and idealistic and all of that. College years. And then it is supposed to wait till you retire. When you're not doing anything else. So then I'm saying, how do you bring it into everyday living? Because when you enter everyday living, you are supposed to park ideology and philosophy behind, then come back to it once you retire.
Yeah. So that you are talking about the practicality.
I have only stated practicality. I'm not a fanboy. I like this man, so no matter what comes, I'll go to him for an answer. It's not that. It's the reverse. It's because the man gave me answers for things at different stages and different ages, is where I began to say, okay, is there a constant point here? I mean, if the same map gives you an answer recurrently, no matter how much you travel, then that's different from asking somebody, ki bhai sahab agla mode kahan padta hai? That's a one-off question. But throughout, if the map holds true, then you say, okay, this is a map drawn by somebody who knows this terrain. So maybe I can trust it further as well. Then that becomes a defining point of the way you travel. Let's assume that as I'm traveling, this is my reference map. My Google Maps, so to say.
Okay. But as you said that, at various stages of your life, he has given you answers. So tell me something, what is there at 17 or at 27 or at 37 or at 47? Something that has really, situation that you have faced or given practical solution that has come your way in these ages, because these are decades apart. These are generations apart, in terms of thought process, practicality, the approach. I think because generation change. I think now we know things change so quickly. So what are those things that that is relevant for, say, a 17, 27, 37, 47, for that matter?
So the 17-ish phase, or the 17 to 27 phase, that initial years, I think the takeaway is that in hindsight, when I go back, one, I realized that, see, today you talk about teen stress, you talk about how young people, especially you say you talk in the COVID phase, people at home, people stuck indoors, psychological pressures of what the world is all about these days, lack of human contact with other people, all of that. And often you say that, if I read the odd story, like, journalistically or elsewhere, the young person is very strongly affected by what his or her peer group thinks. Bullying is relatively easy. A small kid or teenager is, if 6 people around him or her have a perspective that this person is not cool enough, then the person goes into a shell. And you are often desperate to seek validation from the people around you. It could be your classmates, it could be, as you grow older, obviously in college, it's a different circle. But the process of finding your identity through external reference points, and even the rebellions are a little external. If you've seen the book, you know the point I'm making, that you don't have to dress a certain way or color your hair a certain way or use a certain vocabulary to say, oh, this makes me cool, because it's currently supposed to be cool. What Vivekananda does is he eliminates everybody else from your space of being, I won't use the word cool again, but you're complete. You don't need validation from people around you. Are you okay with my thought process? Are you okay with my choices? Are you okay with my behavior? Are you okay with my not so social conduct? I don't need that. So then he allows you to search your own answers, which is the important thing, because otherwise you look for collective answers. कि सब लोग बता रहे हैं ऐसे होता था, ऐसे होता होगा.
Correct.
तो सब लोगों से हटके, I think and through that sense, at 47, how I think is strongly rooted at 17 in having the confidence to say what I think may not correlate to what Rajkumar thinks. He may disagree with what I think, but this is how I think, and I don't need validation for my thought process. So the ability to not have people applauding your thinking and your behavior and say, boss, tu bahut cool hai. Koi bhi nahi bol raha, koi fark nahi padta. So it's one way that you, over time, that's a useful reflex to have. To take unpopular calls, to take individual calls, and not worry so much about the passing approval of your peer group. The peer group could be your classmates in college, could be your teammates in office, could be anything. Like when you make a movie, if the movie is aimed at the critics and 5 leading people in Bollywood, you can't tell your own story because you're factoring for everybody else. What will he think? What will she think? By the time you make a movie which everybody like, nobody likes it.
Correct.
It's nobody's movie. It has to have a signature, right? When you make something.
Yeah.
And some days it will flop, some days it will bomb, some days it will work. Either which way, you have to have the conviction to say, this is how I have thought through and now I'm doing something. And be it successful, be it not so successful, it's fine. It was not done to gain adulation.
Okay.
Otherwise, you go in that phase. अरे यार अभी तो एक फ्राइडे में स्टार हूँ, एक फ्राइडे में कुछ नहीं हूँ. So Vivekananda buffers you.
Okay.
He says what people think. First of all, people don't think too much about what you're doing, so don't rate them too highly. Secondly, are they qualified to comment on you? Not all the time. So don't live your decision making and your choices driven by the vox populi.
Okay.
And that drives things throughout in the calls that one takes. If you write an answer the way you want to write an answer in an examination, rather than what the examiner wants it to be, sometimes now that will lose you 4 marks. Sometimes that maybe this is not exactly how my teacher wanted it, but that's okay. So these are twin thoughts: the comfort with loss and the thought process of standing alone are two things he embeds very early. So if you do this, you'll lose something, right? At 25, you may say, oh, if I do it this way, I will get 2 extra appraisal में मेरे को extra number मिल जाएगा अगर मैं थोड़ा ये कर लूँ. मन नहीं करने का मत करो, काम ठीक से करो, बस छोड़ दो. नहीं मिलेगा appraisal बहुत बढ़िया 26 साल की उम्र पे, काम आता है तो 28 पे मिल जाएगा, 30 पे मिल जाएगा, मिल तो जाएगा.
Correct.
How many filmmakers whose initial movies were a disaster, and after 5 years they were like, oh my God, this man is a genius. I mean, the first week Sholay is a flop, right?
Correct.
So many of us can be Sholay in our careers. You don't have to drag the audience home. भाई साहब मेरी पिक्चर देख लो आज सुबह. अगर पिक्चर में जान है तो आपकी पिक्चर चल जाएगी. So that I think is what holds steady over a long period. And then 27, 37 and all is where you bring in newer lessons. Because at 17 you are against the world, but at 27 you're midway into being part of the world. Then you can't rant all the time because you have to handle pressure and handle contradictions. अरे मुझे ऐसे बोला ऑफिस में, कैसे भी बोला, is that the point? Those classic lines, I mean, especially I've observed that every time somebody gets an unfair deal, we tend to think that the world is prejudiced, the world is biased. This man knows somebody, that man has a siparish, this man has a pull, somebody doesn't like my face. We don't
Yeah.
go back
Yeah.
and say, did I get it wrong? Did I not understand the work I'm doing? Did you not understand the film you're making? How about that question? So that hard questioning is a habit he brings in. He removes the point of grumbling, whining, complaining, competing, basically.
So basically,
Your
you are
job.
saying that. So basically, you are trying to say that that there is in early ages, or even with successful people as we go along, age doesn't matter. The identity crisis, the question of identity crisis, or what I want to be, what is the expectation of somebody else, or vis-a-vis the society, or vis-a-vis the peers.
Lost you for a second. Network is playing up, Raj, but I think I get your question. The point of, first of all, successful people, I don't even know what that means, because what is the benchmark of success that we use? And one thought which I learned in hindsight after reading what he was saying for a long while, and so I've written that in the book, that I think one mistake we make when we communicate, especially with youngsters, who want to be successful, कि बेटा जिंदगी में तुम क्या बनोगे? What do you want to be when you grow up? And there's a tripping point there, because all that question means to us, especially at least in the Indian context, is how do you plan to earn a salary? What job will you do? There's nothing else. There is no other index of what will you be when you grow up. So that space, I think, is a space where this person as a writer is not concerned that, if you go to IIT, you are successful. He didn't go to IIT. He didn't go to IIM. He didn't go to any place. He didn't qualify from Oxford or Harvard, any place. So as an individual, what are you? As opposed to what is the profession that you want to practice, and then where could you buy a flat or the villa? So he frees from that. Hi Raj, good to have you back. I was getting
Raj is back.
Yeah, it got disconnected.
So I was saying that the point of success is a point that Vivekananda dealing. So when you say successful people, first of all, I would say, how would I know about that? I'm very middle class. So I don't know about that space of what is success and how do you handle those things. But broadly, I'm saying that the definition of success itself, in the thought process of a Vivekananda, he declines to join the perspective that if you have made X money, you are kamyab. Or if you have, the mistake we make is, and of course, this comes in movies as well. We sit down, we draw our chart. I will buy this car at this age. I will have a flat here at this age. I will invest this much at this age. And if I have done those big boxing, I'm successful. That doesn't prepare you for the next thing going on in your life at all. Unless you think money is security. Money is actually not security beyond a point. It has it's very diminishing returns in terms of providing you security apart from the basics. So Vivekananda's thought process disengages you from the rat race, if you know what I mean. That if I get into these 3 courses and if I earn this much money, I'm on track. But on track on what? Where is this train going? You're on track, yes, but where does the destination go of this train?
Correct.
So he is coming back more about how you are as a person, as opposed to what is the advantage you get from being that person in the world. I mean, how much money do you make, or where did you get your flat, or how much did that box office earning come your way, or how much did my book sell? These are not criteria he rates as, that makes you successful.
Yeah, I meant the individual identity crisis that all of us go through, whether it's successful people or people who are middle class, or anybody for that matter. Here that thing, Swami Vivekananda says that you have to be comfortable in your own skin, how you are, and you have to look at the world from your point of view. In that sense,
he says that, Raj, but there's a qualifier here. He doesn't say it in the Paulo space. that the world has an obligation to conspire to make you happy and do whatever you want to do, because that's not possible, right?
Yeah, that's not possible.
If 25 people all want to be the great captain tomorrow morning and they all desire it desperately, you can't 25 captains tomorrow. 24 will not get their wish.
It's like people say, think positive, things will happen positive. You know.
I wish that happened, Raj. It doesn't happen. So I think what sometimes, what religion does or what faith does, it gives this broad sweeping lines about you are a very good person fundamentally. Am I? Have I done the homework? So Vivekanand, if you read him in detail, he's also a very, very hard taskmaster.
Yeah.
He is not a gushy, oh my God, I love you with all my heart, with all your flaws. No, he's saying work on your damn flaws. Don't be a narcissist. Don't be self-indulgent. And get rid of the benchmarks which you use usually to say, oh, my life is on track and I'm successful. So he's actually, obviously, once you read the book makes you question, because of what he's saying, it makes you question what you take for granted as I'm in control of my life. Because my bank balance is okay. Because my appraisal is on track. No.
Yeah, that is what is great about the book. You read it and you feel that at some point you feel that, okay, this is, you can identify, you can feel that this is your life. This is something where at some point you have always felt, you have always questioned this, and this is the answer in the book. That's why this everyday living handbook for everyday living really, really appeals. On a larger, I had like while I was reading, I could figure out then that, this is about making choice. Life is also about making choice. A lot of things are about making choices that we make, and we have to live with it. So I think how do we not get influenced by when we make our choices? When we live in a society or people in and around us, and going by that standard, because we always feel that that societal standards are something that we should be measured by. So how making a choice would impact that? How can one make a choice without keeping in mind these standards? Whether society, whether peer standards, or whether your colleagues or anybody for that matter.
So Raj, there is no simplistic answer to this, because a simplistic answer would be saying always do what you believe in. But supposing on my flat, somebody else in the next flat is very unwell or is recovering from a heart attack, and what I want to do is play loud music the whole night and dance. You can't encourage me saying, nahi, apne dil ki karo. How does it matter what the world thinks? That's if I want to drive in the wrong side on the road and say my dil says do it, that's not a thing you want to encourage. So I won't simplify it saying do whatever the hell you want to do, because that's really not how life works. The point here is that how many kids do we see, who are, you ask them, okay, your CV looks offbeat, but you went here and then you came here and then you came here. And the CV, the market saying, this is the part I wanted to do, this is the part my parents wanted me to do. So I did it for them. So I did 3 years of whatever that course or BTech or whatever, and then I realized I didn't want to do that, so I came back and started doing this. Similarly, to a large degree, I guess in our country, life choices, who you marry, when you marry is influenced a lot by people around you, right from family and onwards. So educational choices, partnership choices, career choices, a lot of things are where we are conditioned to saying, let's have a panel meeting. And XYZ in the meeting will sit down and take a decision for you. I think that's the mind space that his writing or his thinking puts you against, saying, look, if you don't believe in something, don't go through for the sake of doing it. Stand your ground. And if that puts you under pressure, if that puts you at odds, that makes you the black sheep of that system of the family, that's a better thing than to accommodate to every requirement of this world. So there's a price obviously you pay when you steer against. But subtle point I'm making is that his point of saying take your own decisions is not about just be a rebel for the sake of being a rebel. That position has to come from a thought, has to come from something you believe in. Then you take a position. not a individualism born funda ki, I am some star and I do whatever the hell I want to do. I'm a superstar in Bollywood, so I will come to shoot when I want to shoot. That's not being individualistic. That's just being a jerk. So he has to be read in totality, because in philosophy and religion, I think the problem area, Raj, is when people cherry pick what they want to pick out. Some line, some quote, and say, देखो ये बोला है, मेरे को लाइसेंस मिल गया. नहीं, लाइसेंस नहीं मिला, पूरा शीट पढ़ लो जो साथ में आया, TNC apply. So in totality, the ability to handle pressure, and see how many Hollywood movies do you watch, right? In which somebody say even the armed forces. I mean, I for my first thought comes here, like, when somebody is, let us say, how many movies we watched where the deep state in America, for instance, wants to do something, or somebody is deployed overseas in Afghanistan, Iraq, and he says, look, we shouldn't be doing this. And the system says, shut up, this is national interest, don't talk about it. You'll be anti-national if you talk about this, because this is what the forces believe in right now. But people take positions. Somebody in Germany in 1944 saying, I think that this philosophy is not, it's not something I agree with. Rommel, for example, who was finally asked to kill himself because the Führer did not agree with what he was doing or thinking. Just if you have a thought process, you have ideology, you believe in something, then stay with it, because life is not such a precious thing to accommodate to everything. That's his second undertone, right? That what are you doing this for? You are in transition. That will not change. No matter how much you go along with somebody else's thought process, no matter how popular you are, you will not stay immortal. You have a shelf life, you have a timeline, you will exit. So don't change everything about how you think to currently earn goodwill. Are you your connection seems to be frozen, Raj.
I think Raj is having some internet issues. So
isn't that the story of our lives for 2 years? कुछ भी करो, network पे depend करता है.
And no matter how much you prep for it, I think last minute there's always a glitch. So
you can't control network anyway. Like you can't control so much else in life, right? So big deal.
Yeah. So Anshul, quickly coming in, I've actually read the book, and I feel like these are such simple and practical ways to look at life, because what Swami Vivekananda is actually saying. Sorry, 1 second. I think Raj is back here. Sorry, Raj, we can't see you on the screen. There's still some network issue from your end.
This is getting very filmy, Raj. You come and you go, you make appearances.
No, I don't know what's happening.
That's
I
fine.
don't know, because my
keeping the conversation interesting, I think.
Yeah. I guess so.
Natasha, you were saying something.
Yeah. So I, coming from a millennial background, I personally have read the book, and I feel it's so fresh, because everything that Swami Vivekananda is saying and everything that you've penned in the book is relatable to a person from any age group. These thoughts are not bound ki, you should read this at this point in your life, or, if you're so stressed, you should read it. These are such simple and easy things that anybody and everybody could follow. So, it's so easy to grasp, actually.
Most thoughts are easy to grasp in what he says, but part of the efforts to structure it like this has been to simplify, because there are so many great minds that we leave them in their greatness on our bookshelves, and we leave them the greatness in our puja corner and on the wall in the calendar. We don't engage with them. So the attempt here is just to remind everyone in a simplified format that there is so much information available so cheaply. 10 of his books will cost you nothing, but it's not as intimidating as it looks. So the idea is that the idea is not to make you stop at the book. The idea is to make you read about him, to then make you read him directly and find your own answers.
That's actually
I had a question related to this. I think times are changing. The world in and around us are changing. Probably earlier, the world used to change, say, 20 years time. Then it happened 10 years. Now then happened 5 years. Now it's changing every year. So in a generation where you have this YOLO generation, you live only once, or a FIRE generation, where they say that financially independent and retire early. So these are very dynamic shifts in society, in things like that, like the world that we live in. So how do these are very these are conventional things being uprooted. So how does will Vivekanand thought principle stand up to this? Be relevant in these time, hold up to it. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? Because it's a very, I think we are living in a continuous changing time.
Raj, I think in the last 2 years we have been taught that one single virus is enough to shut down half our economy. So our planning doesn't really work. So retire early is a good ambition. By the time you retire, what the world has gone through, that also is not open. Now, how do you know how things unfold? So both things have happened. We are changing every 2 years, but the last 2 years have also taught us that we can go back 10 years. And we have no control over it. The best of our science and tech, the best of our homework didn't change anything in the last 12 months, did it? Anybody who's lived through Delhi in the first part of this year, I mean, you know what life was here. So all I'm saying is the fundamentals. And so what are the fundamentals of asking questions? I think among the best questioners is the simplest story of why the Buddha went off, right, to search for answers. Very uncomplicated 4 basic questions. Is this person, what is wrong with him? He's unwell. Will I also be unwell? Very likely at some point. What is wrong with this person? He's old. Will I be old? Of course you'll be old, no choice. What's wrong with this person? He's dead. Will I die? Of course you'll die. Now, no matter what acronym you use, you will be ill, you will be old, and you will die. So I don't think this can grow old. This can't be really old-fashioned. You cannot outgrow death. You cannot outgrow old age. You can't outgrow sickness. You cannot outgrow grieving for somebody who you have lost. So these are the basic battles. Now, financial security, social structuring, all that it's in its own space. But whether you are Julius Caesar or Alexander or Cleopatra, the primary questions of mortality, where you have come from and where you're going to go, I don't think that changes. And for all, my perspective is if you can retire early, it gives you more time to philosophize and not have excuse ki all my life all I do is earn my salary and nothing else I could manage. So actually we should be more philosophical if they have more time in hand and are able to introspect or think about things. As to you only live once, that the jury is out on that for a very long time. None of us really know. But the rationality of so many things one has read, and this is about how we absorb things that we read. There is no ground book here. But whether it is chapter 2 of the Gita and its intricate details about why you should not mourn for death, because death is a process, it's a transition. In that I remember, since you're talking about the Buddha as a parallel, I remember Radhakrishnan had made this point in his commentary on the Gita that the Buddha once he became the Buddha from Gautam, and apparently one day he came back to his father's palace to seek alms, and his father made the point that what are you, and this is very odd, my prince is coming here in these clothes asking for bhiksha, etc., etc. And he said, this is a custom of our people. So his father said, what people? My family, our generation, our lineage has never ever done this. He said, look, it's happened earlier. You have been here earlier, I have been here earlier. This is not happening for the first time. And then later you say, okay, the Buddha Bodhisattva avatars, right? The Buddha was first this, then this, then this. That's one theoretical point. The other and the more interesting part in a practical way was when Vivekananda, or for that matter, Yogananda also made the point that when you, in your life, without any rational reason, without any sociological or other grounds for it, when you have intense attachment or intense dislike for a place or a person by instinct, he said that because there is no social reason for it, that's often born out of previous impressions that you carry forward your thoughts and your reflexes life after life, and they've shaped what you are. So between that, between what the Gita says, and between the irrationality of finishing, which doesn't make too much sense. So Vivekanand, when he enters this space, for me, he gives an interesting perspective. He says the question of whether you are there after death, that's such an absurd question, I don't want to engage with it. That's the most obvious thing. He says, I don't even need to discuss, it's absolute truth for me. But beyond that, he goes on to say, if this world was perfect and ideal, we would be immortal. By its very definition, if this was your final goal, you would be immortal here. Your body would not be meant to expire. The fact that you are meant to lapse, you're meant to have a time span and finish and go away, means and tells you that this planet is not your final goal. It's a space to learn. And if you are learning and you're evolving, then this life is worth it. Otherwise, what difference does it make? How long did you live? So his philosophy is definitely not YOLO.
Okay.
Which doesn't mean that philosophy is wrong, but that's not his take. And I'm influenced by his take, so I come from there. Yeah, but in a different sense, Raj, what is the objective of the you only live once philosophy? That don't be overly subdued, pressurized, weighed into the burden of, oh my God, I have to fulfill responsibilities to my grandfather, father, mother, sister, cousin, relative, boss, everybody in the world. And when will I start living my own life? YOLO is about that, right? Essentially, go and do what you want to do. Don't be living for everybody else's requirements, which is what Vivekananda says anyway at the end of the day. So the objective you come to is the same, even though it's not explained in the same philosophy.
So Anshul, what do you think is your... Gee, I think Raj is having some issues, so I'll ask you the question. I read the book, and I want to ask you, how did this journey of writing the book come about? I mean, I know you've been inspired by Swami Vivekananda since a very young age. You were 16 or 17 when you heard a first quote from him. So how has this journey, of so many years of working and then finally culminating that into a book, how did that come about?
My first caveat is that the word inspired by I would use rarely, because inspiration puts too much pressure on the other party. Also, I think we should be less inspired by people and maybe more intrigued. Because when you're intrigued, you explore and you question and you see, does this work? I mean, if I have an ideology, I want to test drive the ideology. And then only understand that this car is good. Inspiration looks like, oh my God, this man is the answer to my problems. So you stop thinking for yourself. And you shift it on to somebody else, saying, this is my savior. There is no savior for anybody. And in reverse, when you go back and you see Vivekananda's engagement with Ramakrishna Paramhans, is a very educative one, because he would not believe Ramakrishna at face value. So that's also a takeaway, that Vivekananda does not see Ramakrishna Paramhans, somebody who says he actually sees God physically more intensely than he sees his disciple. And he doesn't fall in that space and say, oh my God, this man says he's seen God, where are his feet, let me hold them. Vivekananda asks him questions and asks him questions and asks him questions. And later on he says, for 6 years, I fought my master every step of the way.
Okay.
Before he actually began to believe what he's saying. He questioned and he probed. So that's one footnote, that being inspired or whatever as a phrase, I think it's important to be less inspired and less believe people and philosophies blindly, and to question, explore till you also can first invalidate it. That's part A.
Yeah.
Part B is that I had no, even right now, I don't know why the book is working, because philosophy works when philosophy is your profession. Sometimes I feel that if you're a philosopher full time, 7 days a week you do philosophy, then you become philosopher and you write about things. But philosophy or any ideology as part of everyday work, that this is not my core job to give Gyan Vivekanand. That is not usually a very, very adaptable model, because people say, no, you have to be a guru to talk about these things, and that's what you should be doing. But I think why it's relatable is because in everyday life, when you see something as otherworldly or spiritual or philosophically, it's almost like those diet plans, you lose 20 kg in a month. they look so nice that you never engage with them because yaar ye to zyada ho gaya.
Yeah.
So those diet plans don't actually get bought. They look good on ads. So sometimes the spiritual advice is also it's so abstract and so profound that you say, listen, once I've retired in the whole day, I can try to decipher this thing, I'll go into it. But how do I live my life slightly better, slightly less stressed, slightly less fearful? Basically, the core point, slightly less fearful. Because from the board exam, we train ourselves. Oh my God, what if you lose 3 marks? College admissions, what if you don't get into this place? Appraisal, what if you don't get it? I mean, there's always this horrible race to, oh my God, what if the stock market crashes and my shares go down tomorrow? What if? So, he says, like, can you take it easy? This world is not so important. And I began to write about him much, much later, like maybe 17, I'm writing about him in my 30s, not before that. It began by saying, look, at workplace, he's an interesting man. For me, he's my Stephen Covey. Which people said, what does it even mean? I said, I'll write and show you. So when I wrote that, and that for the first time, got carried somewhere as, okay, this is legitimate thinking. So Vivekananda as a manager monk was my first break into his otherwise, because you keep saying he went to Chicago, he gave a very good speech. That's fine, but I'm not going to Chicago. I'm not going to give a speech. So what do I do with that? After a point, practically, what do I do with it? I can clap for it, but what do I do with that information? I began to say, I'm doing this with this information. Like when I handle my office, when I handle daily traffic, and why I don't abuse people who hit my car. That's part of Vivekananda. Why I don't obsess, oh my God, mera appraisal aa gaya, ask everybody in the company, how much did you get? How much did you get? Did I get more? Did I get less? That's Vivekananda. What are my children studying? Science, philosophy, arts, commerce. Wait. I have, mere sapne hai tumhare liye, tum wahi karoge. No, thank you. That's Vivekananda. Like that. Is the book selling? Is the book not selling? Whatever. That space. So that is what I was chatting, and it began to become into something. Okay, is this a thought? Is this a thought? Is relevant to somebody? So let's try writing. And in that trying writing, it has taken a very long time to come out, actually, even though it might read easy, because there were phases and debates where it was a thought that maybe this should be more about the man's greatness and less about your life. And there, to go back to what Raj said in the very beginning, I did not change the point of what I had to write. So, and therefore, it happened with some publication system that they didn't take the book. That no, it has to be about him. I said, look, he died 125 odd years back. Enough has been written about him. Why should I write a 19th biography of Vivekananda? Why would you read from me? I can only tell you my practical experience. I'm not a scholar of his work. So either I will write it like this, and it will be carried, or no book will be carried. How does it matter? It's not my living to write books on Vivekananda or living from it. So nahi chapegi. So I've stayed with that. This is my life journey. If somebody wants to print it, very good. If not, so be it. So that delayed it by some time, maybe 3 to 4 years later. Again, it is his thought process which instigates to do that. Otherwise, you say, yaar, ek publisher mil raha hai, kuch to maine kaun si pehle kitab chhapi hai, let me modify the book and get it out. No, how does it matter? So it comes 4 years later. What loss? Big deal. But those 4 years you have to stay, right? You have to stay for those 4 years and say, it's fine, this or not. And that's not playing music when somebody is unwell. It's simply saying, I have a position here, and this is my effort. You may take it, you may not take it. So be it.
That's a very beautiful way of looking at life.
It's just arrogant, but if you call it beautiful, I don't mind.
It's practical, actually.
Yeah, coming to arrogance and judgment in a world that we live in, where we keep come to judgment and conclusion so quickly that we start judging people. I remember a quote. I had read a book, where there was this quote where one said that where the author said that we should acknowledge the virtue of withholding judgment, and that struck me when I was reading your book, in that page, that chapter where Vivekananda is invited to come and see a performance by in his honor by
the Raja of Khetri.
Raja Khetri, and he's insulted and he judges that courtesan or her performance even before hearing her sing or her perform. And suddenly, when he hears that and what she does, the performance that she does in terms of bhajan that she sings, he completely, completely reverses his judgment on what he had thought about her or the kind of performance that he was expecting. So I just wanted you to elaborate on that, given the context that with Twitter, Instagram, everybody is out there, that cancel culture, everybody is out there judging each other without even knowing that person. So that brought a parallel also, and it reminded me of that incident in the book and how relevant it is today. As you said, 125 years back. How exactly relevant it is today.
See, Raj, the question of judging and prejudging operates at two levels: individual and collective. Collectively, it is incurable because you feed off each other. Right. So there is no way to solve collective judgment, which is why the world has racism, why the world has communalism, because collectively as a group, any society, any culture, any religion, any color thinks that, oh, we are a more entitled and superior race. And that's not a fight which gets modified easily, even after hundreds of years. So those divisions continue across, and they've always been there at different points in time. It's just that the person filling that slot of being this conceited superior system, that role changes. Somebody else always fills it. But Vivekanand for me is not a collective experience, so I will not go into that space, which is actually political half the time anywhere in the world. It's an individual experience, and there I learned from him and through his journey the mistake that you make the moment you bring religion into your life and you say I'm religious, and the moment you say I'm religious, you carry this this chadar of moral superiority, that somehow this has made me into somebody who's now qualified to judge the world. And when you read Vivekanand carefully, you begin to laugh at the people who say God will judge you for this. Like, how do you know? Did God come to your home and tell you? Is not God judging you for what you did? So this, special slip, God has told me he will judge you. मतलब जाओ अपना आईना देखो यार, अपना घर देखो. So the moral superiority, which is actually habit, which is culture. And so in the book I had to explain that. So where I'm coming from, I was an easy victim of the template if I didn't question myself very hard. Because I tick the right box or the wrong boxes, as you may say. कि अरे आप बोलो अरे यार मैं तो I don't smoke, therefore I'm better than you. मतलब what does it mean? My lungs are better than yours. That may be true, but that's about it. I don't drink. Now I have also read from many other writers, never trust a man who doesn't drink. That's a counterpoint also. And then you say, oh, I'm vegetarian. तो अब है कि बस मुझे माला पहना दो, मैं तो महान बन गया. But that doesn't change anything in the way I think. So I have had to unlearn the reflex of saying, oh, I, and sometimes it becomes we, and that we can go anywhere. And the we though don't do all this. So he was a very educative figure, and in a sense he takes you back to Jesus and the first stone, right? That the people who are actually involved in religion, they are the least judgmental. The people who grasp at the structure of faith and religion are the quickest to then, look at the mirror, comb their hair and say, here I am the epitome of grandness, and all of you fall at my feet because हम तो महान आदमी हैं. किसने बताया आपको? मुझे भी वही कपड़े पहनने आते, मैं भी कुछ मतलब बाल लंबे कर लूं, इससे क्या हो जाता? So I think he gives you a very important point, because conceit and self-righteousness and arrogance about lifestyle choices, about people's behavior, about giving yourself a self-certificate. That's the whole point. That you certify yourself that this is what I do, and as per some reference point, I am therefore morally superior to you. And you live your life not learning from other people, not learning from others who think differently from you, because you don't see them as equals. Once you are superior, तो पानी ऊपर थोड़ी बहेगा, आप तक आएगा ही नहीं. So you don't absorb. And my takeaway is that Vivekanand is judged a lot. I'm sorry, the wrong word to use here. but he's seen a lot for his intellect and his sharpness and his writing, but we don't see enough of his compassion. He was an extremely kind, absorbing, accommodating individual. He was not this fiery man saying, I alone reflect. I mean, in his case, and why it's important, Raj, why this man is important, because he is the only man I have read in the last 500 odd years who has, in a sense, spoken to God firsthand. First, he speaks to Ramakrishna. And Ramakrishna, when first of all says to him, of course, I have seen God, literally. Ramakrishna, while dying, says to him, he who was Rama and who was Krishna is here as Ramakrishna. And when Vivekananda goes to Khir Bhavani, he says the mother goddess came and gave me a lecture on my self-importance. So I'm saying, I have not seen anybody else claiming these things. And he's a very sharp man, so I don't think he had hallucinations and was blabbering. He talks straight about communicating with the mother goddess. If that man is not conceited, aapne aur maine, what have we done in our lifespans that we get inflated about our moral superiority? So I'm saying, if this is what he thinks, then anybody else saying I'm superior is taking themselves far too seriously.
Okay. Just one last question I had on death and sense of loss. As they say that death is the only reality. Everything else is illusion. So dealing with death in the times of COVID, in the times of every one of us have we have lost someone. So how do one deal with the philosophy of dealing it? And then as you read, you realize that everything is about dealing. Dealing with people, dealing with loss, dealing with your family, dealing with society. Everything is about dealing. So in that sense, how what are the thoughts in that process? Quickly, I think.
Wow, talk about death, but quickly. Amazing.
No. I think you want to take audience questions.
I know what you're saying. So I'll summarize the point, Raj, for somebody who's not read the book and who might be engaged in this conversation. First of all, that when you handle death, now when you mean handle, you handle it 2 different levels. One is when somebody comes to you and says, you don't have time left. Your death is imminent. Like, I'm sure you would have read that note from Irfan from London. He's a successful man, right? He's also a philosopher in his own space. He's finally got his due in his 40s and 50s. He's doing great cinema in the world.
Correct.
And then, so what he wrote, and that's something which I wrote with him over many months from London. He was, framing his thoughts. So what does he want to say? And he says, it's like I'm in a train and I assume my destination is many stations away. And then the TT walks up to me and says, excuse me, next station is yours. He says, I'm not ready to get down.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. So then I'm not ready to get down. Point is, what is the station who nobody ever tells us? So one is our own death, which we like to keep it aside. And यार ये बातें कौन करता है? बाद में करेंगे, जब बूढ़े हो जाएंगे तब करेंगे. That's how usually we handle our own topic. And sometimes we are flamboyant about it. We can be arrogant about it. क्या फर्क पड़ता है? मर जाएंगे. You can be very, upfront. Other people's death you can't be so upfront because you are scared.
Yeah.
And that's where you are more vulnerable. Now, my limited takeaway from here is that in the loss of somebody who matters to you, from somebody who's emotionally important to you to a pet, which a child loses, as you know, maybe 10-year-old child loses a dog, and then he or she, you can't make them okay for a very long time after that. I think the way death impacts us, and I'm right now talking about the death of other people in our world and in our lives, there are 2 layers. One is the emotional layer, which is, okay, I have this huge void in my life. Now, no book will solve that void for you. So it's a lie to say. It's like saying, somebody cut off your hand, I'll give you paracetamol. It's not going to change very much. So something you have to absorb, something which will shape you in a way you had not maybe thought about. So emotional price is very, very individual because your relationship is very individual. Vivekananda doesn't step into individual between you and somebody you care about. How it is, what it means to you. So one is the emotional grief of something. But the other is the intellectual part, where I see people struggling at the same time. Because one is you're handling the grief, the other you are thinking, did this need to happen? That's intellectual. Could she not have, or he not have lived 10 more years? Had the doctor done this? Had somebody done that? Had I got some medicine? Had that truck not been on that lane? Had this not happened? You are also intellectually decoding. Could this have happened differently? Could I have done something to change it? And you're also often then, a lot of things are thrown our way when somebody is lost. People come to you with books on grief and other life issues. People come to you with Instagram posts on handling grief. People come to you with religious books, and depending on each culture has its own way of handling, right? No matter what your faith, somebody will have, 30 days, 10 days, 20 days, 40 days, Tirvi, Rasme, all of that. There you are left figuring out. So what happened? You keep thinking, what happened? I mean, as far back as Mukesh, right? 40, 50 years back, दुनिया से जाने चले जाते हैं कहाँ? So that always comes to people. You take a child and you take her out if she's a small child and say, oh, look in the sky, that star is your mother. Obviously, it's not. But you don't know how to explain it intellectually. You don't know what the larger picture is. I think what he does is he gives you the larger picture. So that every day you live, and the simple truth, Raj, is that none of us know whether we are alive tomorrow.
Yeah.
But we insure all things. We work on things. मतलब कार का बैकअप क्या है, फाइनेंस का बैकअप क्या है, सब चीजों का हम सोच के रखते हैं. अगर ये नहीं हुआ तो, अगर वो नहीं हुआ तो. Death का we have no plan B, because obviously you can't have a plan B for it. But whether it is talking about our death, whether it is handling the death of people close to us, the fact that we push the topic to the back of the system as अशुभ topic है, ये क्या बात कर रहे हो, means we are completely unprepared even for the intellectual question. So I'm saying, if intellectually you come from the space, for example, there's a point. There are two things I've written about this in the book, and I'll wrap this here. And Natasha is giving me looks now. But one part is where Vivekananda's own death, and that's been a spectacular thing. I remember at one discussion somebody asked me that, if you had to take one thing away from him, what would you ask him? Like, what would you put to him if you met him? And I said, I'd ask him, how do I replicate a model of dying? It's very grand. It's like, okay, वो आने वाला है, मैं पहुंच रहा हूं, मतलब बैंड बजे के साथ लिटरली कि दिस इज माय टाइम, दिस इज माय लोकेशन, आई विल चूज इट, लिटरली गिविंग अप द बॉडी, which is a choice we don't have. We never know what's going to happen, so we're always scared back of our mind. What if he was good enough to plan it, structure it, and be ready for it from years in advance. You talk about that's aspirational. On the other side, when he wrote to somebody and he made the point that, so 2-3 thoughts I took away. One, he said, you keep thinking, that so somebody had lost their father, and he gave the point that you think that, the world is constant, and you're like, my father has come and gone away. People come and they go away. They move, and the world is static. And he said, it's like the moon in the clouds. You look up and you think the moon is moving. The moon is static, the clouds are moving, but you think that it looks like that. So he says, in reality, it's the other way around. We are permanent. We are static. And the experiences we have, they come and they go away. The body is the experience. It comes, it stays with you, it drops away. But your father is where he was always. And a small point he made there, and in detail, I can't, how much can I talk about this topic often in a online chat, but the core thought, which he said, which surprised me, is he said, your father has taken off the garment that you always wore. But it is my wish that he no longer have to wear such garments again. That he be freed from the cycle of wearing and taking it off. Which is very counterintuitive. मतलब हम तो बोलते हैं भाई शादी हुई तो 7 जन्म तक. मतलब each time let us have or endure each other again. But his point is, being born is not so aspirational. Life on earth is not so aspirational. So if your father has escaped one round, don't wish for him to be back. Like, अरे हर जन्म में आप ही मतलब मैं आपका बेटा बनूं. So he doesn't sell it to you as something aspirational. Let's live again, meet again. मतलब हिंदी फिल्म में तो कितनी बार आप जानते हो राज, पुनः जन्म होता है फिर मिलते हैं. वो जन्म लेना is not so aspirational, विवेकानंद.
Yeah.
So this is a small part. This is not the universe. So if your father has moved on from this universe, bid him goodbye wish him peace, and don't drag him emotionally back into this with your willpower, saying, oh my God, I need to see you again. So you have to be born again and go through the whole cycle. So he pitches death to you as, okay, it's a transit station. Do you have to come back in the platform again? Maybe, maybe not. He doesn't pitch it to you as an end. So you don't mourn, but also you don't desperately want to hold people back. Don't want to stay back. I mean, he doesn't make it so obsessive that अरे यहीं पर हो. यहाँ पर आने के साथ ही the first guarantee is you're going to die. It is the only guarantee of life. So he pitches the intellectual space very differently than our conventional model.
Okay.
So when you handle things, you're only handling the emotional blow of it. You are also not decoding the universal mystery, because you are part of that unsolved mystery. So how are you placed to decide for somebody else?
Correct. Over to Natasha.
I think due to the restriction of time, we'll have to just take up the audience questions. I really wish that, Raj and Anshu, you both could continue talking, because it's been so interesting and there's so much to take away from this. But I'll just quickly take up some audience questions.
We get boring, so let us stop here. Yeah, that's okay.
Not at all. In fact, it was really interesting. So we asked around people who walked into our stores. So a lot of people came, talked about the book. They've bought the book from the store, and we've asked them to, ask Anshul some questions. So I'm picking those audience in-store questions. There was a very interesting one that said, there's a very interesting question that says, is Vivekananda religious or philosophical? What's your take on this?
See, my take is, I've written it abundantly and I have underlined it in a sense that whether you are quote unquote religious or you're an atheist, what he says does not change.
Right.
Because I don't mean to say this in a judgmental way, because Raj is asking me to be non-judgmental. But the point is that religion, the word has come to mean so many different things to different people. And we are, I think, mixing up for a long time. We are mixing up words like culture, ethnicity, language, region, and we begin to confuse that with what religion means. And when you use the word religion, I cannot link it to any region. I can't link it to any language, any place, because I'll give a very small reference point here. Let us say the other day I was seeing Cosmos, the newer version of the show. And so he was saying that, if you compress the history of Earth since, also creation, since the Big Bang, and you compress the time into one single calendar year to give us a sense of what happened when. So from the Big Bang, technically speaking, till today, if you make it into 365 days and 1 year, almost all human history is in the last 15 minutes. And the birth of Buddha apparently is 5 seconds before midnight. So when I do random loud thinking, I ask people around me when they say, look, this is religion, that is religion. I said, when the dinosaurs were around here and we were running away from them and hiding into our caves, was God not present? I'm assuming he was still there. But where were the churches and the mosques and the temples? I'm sure in that era we had not yet gone down to understanding how to build. Finally, the relationship with God is between you and him. And creation does not depend on you offering something to him, or frankly, what can you offer to him? So that also Vivekananda sort of took that conceit also out, that we do things and we become religious and we defend faith and we defend God. God apparently logically was there before we were created, even as a species. So what we do today in our habit format, that is good. It's good culturally. It's good to simplify things at a basic level and bring people into the space. But what all that we do, how we, on the days we fast, we don't fast, what we eat, what we don't eat, what we wear, what we don't wear, etc. These are all support systems. They take you in that direction, take you in that space. It's like agarbatti, right? Agarbatti is not religion. God doesn't need agarbatti. But agarbatti gives you the mind space. Sometimes it brings up that inside you, that you find a space more conducive for meditation. But the objective is meditation. Objective is not the agarbatti. Even without it, you can be as religious. So sometimes we mix all of that. That if we have these 6 things around us, then that's religious. And if you don't have it, you are less religious than I am, or your vocation. So Vivekananda would, or even Ramakrishna would very sharply make the point that religion is between you and God. And that's about it. They did not either mandate any specific cultural behavioral model, nor did they mandate any geography. I mean, how can you assume that in the entire universe, planet Earth is the only domain of the creator who made the planet or everything? So we like to say this is religion, but is this God's version of what religion is, or our version of how we can see it? So if you understand religion as between you and your maker, and the journey of how was I born and when will I die and what is all this about, then yes, it's also about religion. If you see religion as what you do in terms of your externals, he is not really in that space. Then you can take him as a philosopher. And because in that sense, he cuts across everybody, no matter what your practiced religion is, no matter if you're atheist, what he's saying makes sense. So he is not confining himself to, one line of thinking in organized religion. राज आपका नेटवर्क जाता है मेरी लाइट जाती है बट ठीक है it's okay.
No,
Okay,
I would
yes.
quickly want to jump in and say it's been such an interesting conversation, amongst the two of you. And to everyone who's viewing, please go pick up your copy of the book. We have an online store called Sapna Online. We have Sapna Book House. You can walk into any store and buy the copy. It's really interesting, and I'm sure it'll change the way you look at life, for sure. So thank you so much, Anshul, and thank you so much, Raj, for dedicating your time and coming here and speaking about the book.
Thank you so much. I would ask everyone to go and buy this book, read this book, and I assure you there are a lot of things that there are a lot of takeaways for everyone from all walks of life and all age group to take away from this book. And thank you so much, Natasha, and thank you, Anshul. Thank you so much.
मेरी भी प्रमोट हो रही है, मुझे क्यों थैंक कर रहे हो आप लोग? Thank you for being here.
Yeah. It was a lovely conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, and thanks to the audience for tuning in.
Okay, Dasha. We'll engage then.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Yeah.